It's AJ week, Anthony Joshua week, the return to the O2 of the former heavyweight champion. I'm joined by one of his old sparring partners and a man he spent about 10 years in the gym with. Plus, we look back on a weekend of fights all over the country, all types of fights. AJ, heavyweight, a week of boxing. That's what we need, just what we need. I'm Steve Bunce, and this is 5 Live Boxing. So on my sofa today to analyse the weekend and look forward to a big weekend of fights with Anthony Joshua, I've got Professor Richie Woodall, renowned Olympian, world champion and trainer of champions. And next to him, Fraser Clark, renowned competitor, all-round good guy, and, of course, an Olympic medalist. And he's looking at me with that enormous cut on his brow. Fraser, first of all, you boxed on Saturday night in Manchester, forced a second-round stoppage against a good and experienced guy, Bogdan Dinu, hurt him with body shots. It was quite painful. He pulled out. But I noticed that little cut, nick, above your eye. Just tell us, is that an old? It's not. Is that from the Olympic final?
No, that's a fresh one, Steve. Head clash, two big heavyweights. If I remember right, I think we're both going for a right hand, probably both fanning a little bit and bang, collide. One of us come off worse, and unfortunately that was me. But
you could also tell that you were hurting him with those sinking in those body shots. I thought it was a left hook that you'd slipped it under his elbow, but it was a right hand that did the damage, wasn't it, in the end?
Yeah, I think, I've always, obviously been with Richie for years, we've always talked about, you slow people down to that body and it, makes the fight easier as it goes on. And it's just something that comes to me quite naturally, and not a lot of heavyweights do it. So, yeah, something that I like to exploit.
Was you surprised, Fraser, that he lasted only a couple of rounds? Did you expect him to go a little bit more, or were those big telling shots that just too much for him?
I think they were just too much for him, Rich, because if you watch the fight back, you'll see me in the corner when I realise he's not coming out again. I'm actually gutted because I want the rounds. Believe it or not, people talk about these knockouts, but I've been around the block and I know how valuable this in-ring experience is. So I'm a bit gutted again, but, at the same time, it's another win, another stoppage.
It's an age-old expression that every heavyweight that I've ever covered, from Lennox Lewis all the way through Mike Tyson, at some point in their career, they shrug their shoulders, they look down the camera lens and they say, I can only beat who's put in front of me. Plus you were very vocal after a couple of fights when you were screaming blue murder and telling everybody, I need better men in the ring. Hey-ho, that's a nice problem to have, isn't it? I need better men. I want to deal with I'll touch on the Lawrence Okoli defence. Third defence, fights David Light from New Zealand. He's 4 or 5 inches taller, Lawrence, plus he's got something to prove. He's got his new trainer there, Sugar Hill Steward's working with him, no longer working with Shane McGuigan. He's left his management group, he's left his former television channel, he's left his promotional group. He tells me 48 hours before the fight there's nothing wrong. And yet he fights like a man, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but he fights like a man with a foot in one camp and a foot in another camp. He doesn't quite know where he is. What was your impression, Fraser? You've been around him a lot, Lawrence, during your GB years.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and he's got he's one of the most coolest personas in the world, Yeah. Nothing can bother him. But all them things you just mentioned, Steve, the common theme is unrest in every sense of the word. And, Richie will tell you, and I'll tell you, there's nothing better than being settled. You know your gym, your promoter, your manager, you know the way your career's going. And I think it's just been a little bit all over the place. And with the inactivity, I think all that going into one sort of made for the performance we got last night, which is no fault of his own. It happens, but I think he'll be looking at it. He's a realistic guy. He can do better.
I think he missed a trick, Fraser, myself personally. I thought that he could have boxed a little bit better, although ring inactivity did play a big part in it. I thought at times he could have gone for the stoppage, but he just held back. Maybe he's thinking, because he's been out for so long, is his fitness going to be affected? But I just thought I was just a little bit disappointed because of all the unrest that's gone on beforehand. If he could have made a statement to people that he's just left, saying, "Look what you're missing out on here." Yeah. I think he could have done a bit better than what he did, Steve.
Well, listen. I tend to agree with you, but this is what Lawrence Okoli said after the fight, this is his assessment. He was speaking at ringside to our man Manny, the Mannequin Rye, because we managed to give all of our people nicknames. That's the way we do it, Rich. Manny, the Mannequin Rye, caught up with Lawrence Okoli. This is his assessment of what happened in that Manchester ring.
I'll probably give it like a 5 out of 10.
Why is that?
Because I felt a little bit rusty in there. I was trying to work a jab, started getting a little bit tired, which is not like me. But, you know, after 13 months out the ring and all the stuff that I was going through, it was hard to get myself going. But, you know, I managed to just dig deep and get through.
When you say the things you were going through, can you just elaborate a bit on that?
So obviously, it's, you know, I'm a champion, so I should be able to ride through anything. But with the personal stuff going on outside the ring, the promotional stuff, there's a lot of pressure. And I felt it in there, but ultimately I was able to get through, get the victory against a tough guy. I hurt him several times, but I just wasn't able to get the finishing shots.
New trainer, new promotion. Does this feel like a fresh start for you?
Oh, it does, but you know what? I felt like the whole build-up to this one, it was a different kind of pressure to the one I'm used to, usually just getting a win. But now it's people calling me out, promotional disputes going on behind the scenes, a whole bunch of stuff. But you know what? I'm proud of myself for getting in there through all of it and coming out with a victory against someone who wanted to change their life.
Well, just a word on Sugar Hill. What's it been like working with him?
No, it's great. I think, you know, with that one, it would have been very, very tough to get through that without Sugar Hill, you know, drilling in certain instructions and forcing me to dig deep, you know. It's very easy when it gets tough to just give up on yourself, but I kept on pushing.
And David Light, he was tough. I mean, you hit him some big shots. He had a chin, right?
Man, he was tough. You know, I should have known, because his last fight, I sparred the guy he boxed, and that guy's a great puncher, and he got through that one well. I was throwing absolutely everything I had at him, but, you know, I had to try and manage my fitness, because I think it was at 8th. I hit him with a great shot, emptied the tank, and he rallied through, so good stuff.
I need to ask you about your ring walk. You walked out to Hate Me Now by Nas. Absolute classic song.
Thank you.
Was there a meaning behind that?
Yeah, of course, for me, like I said, I'm a human being, you know. There's a lot of stuff, as I've said 3 or 4 times, that's gone on behind the scenes. And for me, I'm very happy with my life. I know where I started, I know where I'm at, and I'm really happy for what I can go on and accomplish.
And just finally, Lawrence, what is next for you, and how soon do you want to be back out there?
For me, I need to be back in immediately. You know, I think for me, that year out of the ring, it does have an effect. You know what I mean? I'm in there. It's my first time in a year doing a ring, making weight, doing a ring walk, rehydrating. How do I feel? You know, I felt springy in the back. I was reasonably springy in the ring, but it's different when you have someone putting everything on the line for it.
There's a lot of decent British cruiserweights knocking about who'll be looking for you and looking for that belt. Do you say bring it on?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, maybe some of them will watch that and think they got a shot, but I know I'll be right back in, brushing off the cobwebs as I have done, and I'll be pushing on for what's next.
That's Manny Rye there talking to Lawrence Okoli. So there we got 5 out of 10, which is possibly fair. Maybe some people might have thought it was slightly lower than that. But he has acknowledged and admitted that the stuff that went on, the unrest, as you call it, was a factor. And I would put it to you, Fraser, and you also, Rich, that stuff is stuff that you might not fully understand, but then it can manifest itself in the week of a fight, or in the night of a fight. So you might go through a fantastic training camp dealing with all that stuff over here. You don't think it's affecting you until you get in the ring, till you leave the change room. And I think that might have been what happened to Lawrence Okoli, to be honest with you, Fraser. It might have only dawned on him that there was something missing once he was in the ring.
Exactly. I think it's so important, you know, to have the right, you have to have the right camp. But that fight week, I've just spoke to my missus today. She goes, "It's nice to have you back." You know why that is? Because I sort of leave everything behind, Steve. Yeah. I love the kids and I love the missus. I speak to him if and when, but I think she has to understand on that week, I'm solely focused. And with Lawrence, I think there seems to be that much that's sort of catching up with him. If it's not obviously the new promotional company, the new trainer, then you've also got his old promoter and him going back and forth. Just things you don't need on a fight week.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to stick with that theme there. The idea, so, because you were, you live in Burton or outside of Burton, and you were fighting in Manchester. Would you have stayed at home, Loughborough to Burton? Would you have commuted and stayed at home during that last week, or did you move to Manchester for 3 or 4 days?
No, I take myself away.
Okay.
I like to become a different person. I like to become very, very focused.
And you do become a different person.
And I do, and I like to become very focused. And I think, as much as, like I say, the nicety of being around my family is not it's not the environment for me. I take my 2 best friends that are both, have been around gyms and been around fighting.
Understand you.
And, it becomes the place where Fraser Clark, the father and the family man, he just left aside, just pushed aside for a minute. It's business time.
And you find you've got to, Richard, did you do the same? Did you, when you were fighting, were you commuting at home or
No, I was.
Did you have a normal life and just went to the gym and trained and fought?
Wow. I was always settled in my own camp at home. I used to bring my sparring partners in, put them in hotels, this, that and the other, and they report to the gym, and I would live at home, because that's where I was happy, and everyone is different.
It works for some people.
It works for some people. It works for didn't. My wife knew what was going on, and, we were great together, no problem there. But, yeah, I was happier just staying at home, travelling to the gym, coming home, getting my rest, getting up in the morning to run. My dad would pick me up, we'd go to the track, things like that. So, yeah, that's my routine, and it worked for me.
Because some fighters can't be at home at all. I remember once doing some stuff with Steve Collins when he was fighting. Not only could he not be at home with his wife and 2 young kids, Steve Collins, former double world champion from Dublin originally, but sort of fought in Boston and obviously based himself for a while in England. He couldn't even be around his wife or kids. And wait for it, phrase, he couldn't talk to them. So he'd go away in camp. He'd be with Freddie Roach in Jersey, building up for the Eubank fight or the Ben fights, and he wouldn't even talk to them. He wouldn't shave. He wouldn't talk to them, and he would just get into a completely different zone that he should never be around anybody.
No, I can understand.
Can you see that?
I can understand it in a way, and with me and my missus, it becomes a bit of like she's there when I need her. The first few weeks of camp. First few weeks, if I'm doing, say, the camp as such, but I'm training all year round, so remember, it doesn't feel like camp because
just
I'm
like
always
you've been
training.
doing for the last X amount of years.
Exactly. So I stay in Loughborough 6 weeks. I do that Monday, Friday, 6 weeks, and then but before that, let's say the first 2-3 weeks, I do the commute. It's only 30 minutes.
Of course.
So she's there, she's cooking my food, and she's just helping me out. But what I put it down to, my wanting to be away, is like you say, for 10 years.
Yeah, that's
I've
what you did anyway.
I've done Monday to Friday in Sheffield, and it's always given me good results.
Yeah.
And I've always been around. I've always had good mentors, Richie, Rob McCracken, and one thing that Rob used to really talk into me was that that when you come to the gym, you can leave all your problems at the door, and I just feel like being away, I don't have no problems anyway. So I was just institutionalised to being away in camp and being around other athletes.
That's actually, I would argue, that's good preparation for becoming an elite fighter, where invariably you'd be fighting overseas and or having a training camp overseas. So if you didn't have the benefits of all those weeks or years and months at GB and your partner it would be unfamiliar with it. Suddenly, you become, you'd be married and you'd be going away for 6 weeks and then you'd be back and then going away again for 6 weeks. That could cause frictions. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting thing, especially what you're saying there, is that you were comfortable going home each night to your wife, Bosh, no problem. Going to the gym, having a hard spar, just good or bad, still going home. And yet what you're saying, Fraser, what I'm getting from you is somewhere down the Steve Collins route that really you don't want to be around them anyway. You want to be around them, of course, but you don't want to be around them in that last week or so.
I mean, I think I'm very lucky in the day and age that I'm boxing in, because obviously Richie's a little bit older than me.
So there's no need for that.
I
don't think there's any need for that.
I have a lot of benefits. I have FaceTime. I have Skype.
Good point. Yeah.
So it bridges the gap a bit.
Richie just had reverse charges. Cool.
Exactly. So it bridges the gap a little bit, and it makes it a lot easier for me.
That's a really good point.
But like I say, I've had a long time of doing. I don't like change.
But it's what works for you as well, which is important.
Yeah.
As a fighter, it's what works for you. I remember.
You can't force a camp if that's not your style.
Exactly,
if your style is being at home with your mum cooking your food, you've got to go home to your mum.
And it's what works for you. And the proof of the pudding is proof of the pudding is in the eating, isn't it? And it's what results it brings for you. And if you're winning fights on your preparation and you're happy with that, then that's the way to go about it.
Because I think Carl Frott's prepared for almost every single one of his fights by driving home to Rachel and the kids every single night from Sheffield or wherever they were training. And it worked for him.
And the individual, Steve, I've only heard the stories of Richie and his discipline. Yeah. So he probably can go home. Okay. You see me when I go home, there's too many opportunities.
Oh, no way, Fraser. I'm not accepting that.
I'm just, listen, I can hold my both hands up and say, I find it easier if there's a cupboard with no chocolate in it.
You're still living above the Chinese. You still got that flat above the Chinese.
I'm not far away. So, I think it helps with my discipline to be. If
Being
I'm
a
on
camp.
Loughborough University campus,
Yeah.
the sporting campus.
Yeah, of course it
You
is as well.
you can't get a takeaway for love or money.
That's the truth,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? So that just helps me on my side of things.
Well, let's get back to Saturday night and David Light being thoroughly outpointed by Lawrence Okola. Did you speak to Lawrence afterwards? He gave himself 5 out of 10 there, talking to Manny Wright. But my gut feeling is that perhaps, truthfully, he probably was a little bit disappointed that, as Richie said, he didn't make a statement because he had a chance to make a statement. Did you manage to grab a word of him?
No, I've been there, Steve, where you've not quite done what you want to do. You've got a million cameras in your face. I'll speak to Lawrence in the week. Do you know what I mean? I think
Good point.
Go on, mate. Get out of here. Go and relax a minute. You've got a million messages online. Everyone's off slagging you.
Yeah.
I can speak to him another time.
I think the whole experience, though, will serve him well. The whole experience of he's probably going into that fight thinking that what's happened to him outside of the ring wouldn't affect his performance inside the ring, but it clearly did. He didn't perform quite to what we thought he would and what he wanted to. And the whole experience of what's happened beforehand, Steve, will serve him well in the future. This game's all about experience, remember, inside and outside the ring. And when you're dealing with promoters, managers and other promotional companies and whatever, and things don't quite go your way, that's affected his performance, and he'll learn from that. And like I say, he'll learn from that experience.
Now, we know he's split from Eddie Hearn and split from Matchroom and walked away from DAZN to go on to Sky, and he's walked away from his management group. We know all of that. Those are things that we can debate about whether or not that's having an influence on him. And I think he said, there's been a lot of pressure and the stuff in the last year. But how about the influence, if any, of Sugar Hill Stewart, a man that's been working with him for this fight? It's the first fight he's worked with him. A man obviously transformed Tyson Fury from a big guy who used his assets into a big guy who stood in front of you and let bombs go. Did you see much of the Sugar Hill Stewart Kronk-style influence in the ring, or did you just see glimpses of it, or none of it?
But like you just said, these things take time, Steve.
Absolutely.
This doesn't happen overnight.
But in this day and age, you don't have time.
It doesn't, but it doesn't happen overnight. You can't implement. You go back to what you do. You try and do a little bit of what you're being taught. Of course you do. You have little reminders, and you got the coach shouting down from the corner. But these things take time, and you only see subtle changes.
Sure.
So on that part of things, you're going to have another camp, maybe another 2 or 3 camps before you really start seeing what Sugar's trying to implement to Lawrence.
I think the positive side for both of them, for Sugar Hill Stewart and for Lawrence Okola, is that he's working with a top-class athlete who's got, like I've said before, Steve, I've said to you many times, Okola's got the tools.
Yeah.
He's tall, he's rangy, he's got power, he's got a good boxing brain. Surely Sugar Hill Stewart has got the tools there to work with to make him into a better fighter. Fraser's hit it bang on the head. It takes a bit of time, but he's got the ingredients there to make a really good fighter.
Now, before we hear from Lawrence Okola's promoter and your promoter, Ben Shalom, I want to ask you something that Fraser touched on there as a half a joke, but it's something that's quite interesting. Fraser, every time you box, you get people to say he's fighting bums on social media, he's not improving. Then you get other people saying, don't worry, Big Fraser's got the class. Basically, you get people that shouldn't be able to talk, communicating directly with you in millions of hours. Richie, you didn't have that.
No.
Now, you gave some boxing lessons out at Telford Ice Rink, okay? Quality lessons. You won some world title fights. You lost some world title fights. You were in some incredible fights. But you never had to worry about people you'd never met who use an ostrich riding a horse as their logo online, giving you abuse or praising you. Let me ask you this. How do you think you'd cope in the modern era with thousands of people getting down your throat because you've just lost your world title, or thousands of people getting down your throat because you've just narrowly won the European title? How do you think you'd cope? And then the second part to you, Fraser, how do you think you'd do in a world where there was no social media? You could just box and you have to wait till next week's boxing news to see what people thought about you. You first, Rich.
I'll say it's a massive distraction, and if I was boxing today, I wouldn't be on social media.
Interesting.
I wouldn't even be on it, Steve, because with no disrespect to some people out there, there's some people that don't quite know as much as I do about boxing that are trying to tell me things about boxing that, no, I don't agree with you. And I wouldn't want to get into those arguments anyway, with all due respect to people. They've got their opinions and they're entitled to them. But for me, it would take up too much of my time, and it's negative energy that you don't want to be concentrating on. So to a certain degree, I'd be off social media, as I am now. I don't get involved with people's discussions. I got my views, they got their views. I listen in occasionally, but, I stay out of it. And that's the way I'd probably go as a fighter, because there's too many distractions. Fraser will know, and he'll certainly will know, that it's hard enough to be successful in this game when you're concentrating 100% and staying disciplined without all that other stuff.
So, Fraser, negative energy, which is picked up on there. So how do you think it would be in a world without social media? Boxing, especially boxing of all the sports, we're the one that we're penetrated deep.
It's a catch-22, Steve, because what it does for me in terms of getting me out there and promoting me to the masses is great. But what it does for me in terms of, I'm not afraid to admit it, Steve. I get told off weekly by my management and by my missus because I'm arguing with Barry the bricklayer, who's never put a glove on his life, about things you don't know, and I've got no need to. It's just, like Richie said, it's complete a waste of my time.
So why do you do it? Because I'll do the same, but why do we do it? Why do we argue with Barry the bricklayer?
You know what it is, Steve? I'm a proud person, and, I'm a normal person. So if Barry the bricklayer walked past me in the street and called me boxer and told me that I'm an idiot and told me that I look terrible and my kids are ugly, and because the things that have been said,
absolutely, yeah,
then I take him out. I'm a normal person. So, I think the problem is...
But they wouldn't do that, would they, in the street?
No,
they do on social media.
This is the problem. But, I don't know no different, Neve. Remember that, Steve.
Yeah.
I've grew up with social media.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't know any different. But what would it be like without it? I think it would have been I think my mind would be at rest. I don't like to use the word mental health, but I'm a strong person, and I can understand why some people get really drawn into it, really down, because it's not nice. I respect everyone, and I don't mind anyone in the world having an opinion about my boxing. That's fine. But when it becomes personal and when it becomes nasty, I just think there's no place for it.
And it does become personal and it does become nasty as soon as you point out the shortcomings. Anyway, we've been talking about Lawrence Okole's third defence of his WBO cruiserweight title on Saturday night in Manchester on a boxer show. Now, Ben Shalom is the promoter boxer. He's your promoter. Here's Ben Shalom after the fight.
To be honest, it is what I expected, in the sense he'd been out of the ring 13 months. He's facing a guy that cannot be stopped by anyone. I've spoken to Joseph Parker. He's probably one of the toughest spars he's ever had. He's a very, very tough guy. And as Lawrence, changing trainer, 13 months out of the ring, it was what it was. I think he boxed well at times. I thought he could have got him out of there in at least three rounds, the 10th and the 11th in particular, and that's probably where he should have got him out of there. But for me, it's about, he had to take this fight. It was a mandatory fight, it was an awkward fight, it was a tough fight, and now we can move to the Richard Riappo, now we can move to the unification. We've seen how good he is. I can't see a cruiserweight, if I'm honest, coming near to him right now. But he didn't get the knockout he wanted. He won't be too happy with his performance. But for me, after 13 months out the ring, a complete change of trainer against a mandatory challenger who is that tough, it's a job well done. So, I'm happy.
What's it been like working with Lawrence Okole?
For me, easy. He'll take anyone. He'll fight anyone. He doesn't care who. He wants the unifications. He wants the Richard Riappo. He wants to go to heavyweight. Extremely easy. And he's a very intelligent, well-considered man. And he's an extremely talented boxer. I think for him, he wants to... He's in the process now of changing his style. There was a lot less hugging tonight with Sugar Hill, and he's looking for those knockouts. It didn't come tonight, but I think now he's got that 12 rounds under his belt and the ring rust is off. He's in a very, very good position for the biggest fights of his life.
And staying in the division, Chris Billing-Smith's got a big fight coming up. Do we have an opponent yet?
It'll be announced Monday, Tuesday. It's a monster because it's in the stadium, and that's what he dreamt of. That division, for me, is now perfect. Lawrence has got his mandatory out of the way. Richard's built to world level with such momentum now. He looks like possibly he's the only cruiserweight in the world that could be Lawrence Okoli. So it's all there now. CBS, Lawrence, Richard. We want Jai Opataya. We want Golamarian. Those are the fights to expect this year.
So have you just confirmed that it's going to be Lawrence Okoli next?
No, no, I haven't. But
is he going to be British though?
I'm not saying, because there's 3 options, isn't there? And we'll announce it next week.
Okay, and just a word on Big Fraze and Karras and what you thought of their performances.
I think Big Fraze is looking better every time I see him. He looked fitter, physically much better for me. Got out a very experienced guy in 2 rounds, and he'd broken his ribs. So for me, very happy with Fraser. I think hopefully that cut doesn't keep him out of May the 6th, but he's going to go right to the top of the heavyweight division. I'm convinced of it. Karras Artistall is extremely talented. She's probably the Olympian from Tokyo that's most suited to the pros out of any of them, and just taking it like a duck to water. And both of them hopefully can get out as soon as possible.
Ben Shalom there, probably being more honest than, well, for a lot of people in our boxing business. I quite like Ben. He's your promoter. Ben was talking about you, Fraze, and saying that he was hoping to have you out early May in Birmingham on the Joshua Buatsi fights, and when Ben Whittaker's going to come back from his injury, your teammate, or both of those are your teammates. But you're not going to be able to fight with that cut, are you, on May 6th?
No, I think obviously as a promoter, he's very optimistic, Steve. But I'm the captain of this ship, and my priority is to have a healthy head. I don't want to get no more cuts, and we're looking for the future longevity. So if it's right, I'll box. If it's not, which it's probably not going to be, it's a no-go. Yeah,
and there's plenty of stuff coming up in May, later in May. And there's plenty of time. No need to rush a cut, Richie. It's like an injury to an ankle of an athlete. Don't rush a cut, never. You've got all the time in the world. Interesting weekend of fights. We talked there about Lawrence Okoli, perhaps not sending the message he could have sent, or we wanted him to send, but maybe he will against David Light next time.
He got the win, Steve.
He got the win, and he won clearly.
Let's give a little bit of credit to David Light as well.
Yeah, by the way, we've overlooked all week.
Exactly.
Didn't even talk to him.
And, because he's not big, he's not brash. Yeah. He doesn't walk around with an entourage. We've totally disregarded.
He's just gone 12 rounds with Lawrence Okoli.
Exactly.
He might be the best cruiserweight in the world.
A mandatory challenger, unbeaten. I think he was 20-0. He knows what he's doing, you know what I mean? And he didn't come all the way from New Zealand
to lose.
He didn't come all the way over here to sit down.
No, in fact, I'm going to apologise, and I'm going to blame the producer for not getting David Light. When I went up to interview David Light, he said, don't worry about him, he's just a Kiwi, he's here for fodder. No, David Light, I tell you what, we've overlooked David Light, and we've underserved him, David Light. We salute you, David. You've gone 12 rounds with Lawrence Okoli. You didn't win the fight, but you were there. You took some good shots as well. You pushed Lawrence Okoli. You made him work. And as Lawrence said in the interview, he's not a bad fighter. He's a good fighter, and he didn't come to roll over. That's good. On Friday night, I was at a show. It was on Channel 5, and Lyndon Arthur, it was a change of opponent, 24 hours notice. A guy called Boris Crichton came down from Aberdeen, put up a good display, got dropped in the last round, hurt badly in the ninth. But Lyndon was a little bit hesitant, but that was late replacement. Richie, something you know about. Late replacements, they are something not to be underestimated in our boxing business, Rich, because they can cost people careers. They can derail careers. Late replacements, especially good ones.
Well, they're in a no lose situation because they're expected to lose anyway. And very often there's no pressure on them. So I remember boxing Glenn Catley. He was a good fighter, Glenn Catley, but at that time when I was world champion,
WBC Superweight defence, Telford Ice Rink, son.
Late play. I was meant to fight Nardiello, so I trained for a southpaw,
tricky, elusive southpaw.
Exactly, and then Glenn Catley comes in a week and a half notice, I think, and he's training for a fight, but gives me a hell of a fight. No pressure on him. And for me, I've always said that he should have got the title that night. I thought he won the fight against me.
He did, that.
But, so what I'm saying is I've had an experience of late replacements. Like I say, there's no pressure on the late replacements as they come in. They're expected to lose, and sometimes they box out of their skin. And I think Lyndon against Crichton, no pressure on him, and Lyndon gave him a lot of respect. Yeah. So I have to say that. He's actually started the fight as if he was in against like an Anthony Yard, and he respected Crichton. Probably give him a little bit too much respect, but Crichton, give him a good fight.
And I think this will take us nicely to where we're going, Steve. Anytime someone says late replacement, one name comes to my head.
Yes.
Andy Ruiz.
Don't worry about that.
Every time, and it was the same for me this week. Remember, mine was a late replacement as well. And I'm glad. This is why my experience is good. I've seen a lot go before me, and I learned from that all the time. As soon as I knew that Rydell Booker was out, I didn't even think of a new opponent. I thought AJ Andy Ruiz. Yeah. So there we go.
So just to remind people, in 2019, Jarrell Miller, Big Baby Miller, was fighting Anthony Joshua at Madison Square Garden. It was all set up. It was a lot of fun. It was going to be explosive, and Miller was selling it. Then he failed a drug test. Then he failed another drug test. I think he failed 3 drug tests in a week. He loved those drugs they did, Mr. Miller. And they dragged in Andy Ruiz. Don't worry, you won't get sued for that. That's the absolute truth. Then they called in Andy Ruiz. And, of course, the one thing with Andy Ruiz, he had a bit of a belly on him. And he was a Mexican. And he arrived in New York with all of his family, smiling. He bought himself a new gold necklace. And to all intents and purposes, he was on holiday for a week, big phrase. He was up there for a week. He was up there for a few quid. Gets in the ring, then he gets dropped in whatever, the 4th round or whatever, and it looks like it's all going to be all sweet and roses. He turns it around, ends up dropping AJ, stopping AJ, ruining the AJ machine up until that point. That is, Andy Ruiz might go down in history as one of the great late replacements, not just for what he did in the ring, but for those few days in New York when we were all convinced he was there on a jolly, absolute jolly.
He played a blinder.
He did play. Andy Ruiz, we permanently salute you because you're an awful lot of fun. Now, Saturday night, phrase, I hate to tell you this, and Richard's going to tell you, whilst you were getting ready to bash up Bogdan, we were in Telford and we saw what Richie and I think might have been the greatest 10-round fight either of us have seen. Richie, tell Big Phrase what he missed.
Yeah, it was an incredible contest. Andrew Kane and Yannick Baluta from Romania.
Based in Britain.
Based in Britain. He's never been stopped. But Fraze, the first round, Kane comes out, Andrew Kane from Liverpool, very explosive, comes from a great gym, Everton Red Triangle, got good sparring with Nick Ball, Bradley Strand, Peter McGrail, and he was in great condition for the fight. Comes out in the first round, explosive, puts Baluta down twice. It looks like it's going to be all over in the first round.
First minute of the first round.
Minute. He's probably one punch away from actually victory, but Baluta somehow gets his way back, claws his way back into the fight. And man, did he show what a chin he had, Baluta. Round after round, it's up and down. It's one of the most exciting, well, we've said, the best 10-round fight that I've ever been to. It was like that. It was like phrase. Their souls were on the line. That's what it was like. It was one of those. Like it was for the undisputed championship of the world. That's what it looked like, Steve, didn't it? Yeah. And Baluta turns it round.
Isn't that why we love it? Isn't that why we love it? I you know what? Now you told me I couldn't see it live.
You got to see it
this afternoon. This afternoon it's going on. Do you know what I mean?
I'm a bit worried about Fraze because he's detoured, right? Okay, he's left the boxing. Okay, he's not gone straight home. Okay, now he's talking about watching the fights. Imagine you go home, you've been away from your partner and your kids, and you shout, he said, "I'll be okay. I'm just going upstairs to watch Andy Kane fight on Saturday night. I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him, but." Yeah, I haven't seen it, but Richie and Bunty told me it's a really good fight. I'll be down in an hour.
Yeah, she's not going to be too pleased with you, Fraze, is she?
No, I tell you what, it was sensational. And then towards the end, Kane was dropped. He was hurt. And I thought Kane had done enough.
I still thought he won the fight.
But it went on a split to Baluta, which completely kills all ideas that we're corrupt and crooked and only favour our own. It was a special event. Perhaps that's the type of fight that you don't expect to hear us talk about on the show. But you know what? It was so good. It will win awards at the end of the year. And I think it was just worth getting that mentioned. Coming up next, we'll be talking AJ. Just AJ.
Match of the day.
Top 10.
Where if you don't mind me saying so, defending his titles there, winning his titles there, winning the crowds there, learning his trade there. Now he's back. And, well, you've been around him an awful lot, Richie, over the last X amount of years. You've been around him a lot over the X amount of years. And, in fact, Fraze, I always famously tell the story that when AJ wins the world title, you were working, you were on security detail that night. And I remember in that chaos and that melee when Charles Martin goes down and everybody's jumping up and hugging each other and screaming and shouting. And AJ's in the ring and there's this moment, I always tell this story, there's this moment in the ring. AJ's just seconds away from being crowned the heavyweight world champion. And there's mayhem all over. And there's two people that are calm. It's AJ and Big Fraze. And they catch each other and they're looking at him. And I swear, Big Fraze is going with his right hand. Calm down, calm down, calm down. Because that's what he needed, to be calm. Because Martin could bang. If he'd have got up, Martin, the one shot he'd have thrown and AJ had walked onto it, we might have had a different boxing history, Fraser. You helped him win the title, Fraser.
I'll take some credit for that. But you know what? When you're around quality boxing people, I often say, I'll try, and I was only doing what I know Rob McCracken would have been saying, what he would have been doing. So you sort of pick up from other people, and I was just doing what I knew he needed to do.
Okay, so that was when AJ won the world title against Charles Martin, and he actually had 12 consecutive world heavyweight title fights. This Saturday is the first time since then that he's not been fighting for a world title. He fights Jermaine Franklin at the O2, as I say, his old stomping ground. It's live on 5 Live from 10 p.m. on Saturday night. Now, many people, well, half the people I speak to are dismissing Jermaine Franklin, and the other half are saying, no, don't write the kid off. Richie, where are you on that?
I think this is very good matchmaking indeed. I actually think that Jermaine Franklin, not the best heavyweight from America, he's behind Ruiz and Wilder and Gerald Miller, I would say, but nevertheless, decent heavyweight, slow on his feet, short and mid-range. He's strong. He can bang a little bit, but I think this is brilliant matchmaking because he's only 6'2" and fairly slow on his feet. I think this is the fight where Anthony Joshua can really shine and really get in people's thinking again about being the best heavyweight in the world. Because up until he had that blip against Ruiz, he put that right, and then up until those Usyk fights, he was still most people's number one. There'll be a lot of Tyson Fury fans that will disagree with me, but as a nation, people thinking AJ and Fury was always the big fight that they wanted to see. He was always on everyone's mind. The two Usyk defeats have obviously damaged him to a large extent in the boxing world. But this fight itself, Steve, I've looked at Franklin. He's tailor-made for Anthony Joshua to look very good against. 6'2", slow feet. I think Anthony Joshua, he could look really good in this scrap.
And does he have to look good, Fraser? Because he's just done 24 rounds with Alexander Usyk. He's lost both of those fights. Both of them were relatively close. The second fight, he thought he won, and he had a bit of a meltdown, a bit of a tantrum, got a bit angry at the end, which he's apologised for. So he's coming off the back of those two defeats against Alexander Usyk for 3 of the World Championship belts. This is a fight that, okay, I'll put it to you. A, he just has to win. B, he has to win and look good. Which one of those two is it, Fraser?
I think I always think winning is everything, but in this instance, I will say he does need to look good because remember how fickle boxing fans are.
Oh yes, we
talk about the run he went on, Steve. We talk about the rise of Anthony Joshua,
dragging us all along.
A relative novice winning the Olympic Games. Yes. A relative novice winning a world title and then defending it against all them names.
90,000 at Wembley, Vladimir Klitschko.
He's always massively underrated for his resume and what he's done. But like I say, I think you can only go off what's in front of him. To box 24 rounds with Alexander Usyk, for me, probably the best in the world at the minute. It's chalk and cheese. This fight is chalk and cheese. It's very, very different.
If Anthony Joshua knocks Franklin out in spectacular fashion, I think Fury AJ is back on as a bigger fight than Fury Usyk because it's the fight that the public want. Deep down, it's the fight that the public really want to see.
Well,
so if he looks good and sells himself in this fight, that fight could be back on. And it's equally, if not as bigger than the Fury Usyk fight.
Could I ask on behalf of everybody in this room and everybody listening to this and all the boxing fans there are in Britain, all the boxing fans there are globally, that once the negotiations start again for Fury against Joshua, please, boys and girls who are in charge of putting that fight together, do it privately. Don't let us be witness to 4 or 5 months of negotiations. Last year, I remember, we got to the date, August the 8th, we were going to Saudi Arabia for Joshua against Fury. We'd had a year of it. We had 3 months of solid negotiations. It was on, it was on, it was on, it was off. It was off. We just need to know the fight's happening.
Yes.
Let's not have 3 months of
This
negotiating.
This is the road back for that fight to happen. If he looks good in this next fight against Franklin and he knocks him out and he does it in spectacular fashion, Phrase, I think that fight is back on. This is the road back. And that's the fight that deep down every boxing fan in this country,
And that's why
if not the
Franklin's
world,
so ideal.
wants to see. Yes, ideal.
Yeah, okay.
6'2", slow feet. He's tailor-made for a spectacular knockout for Joshua.
So in a moment, we're going to hear from Eddie Hearn, who went out to Dallas, where Joshua is now training. In fact, Joshua's going to have the third person in his corner in 3 fights, consecutive new coaches. He's working with Derek James, who works, of course, with loads of good fighters in America, most noticeably Errol Spence. Phrase, a new trainer for the third time in as many fights. That's going some, my friend, isn't it?
Not ideal. But I believe at the stage AJ's at and everything is gone before him, remember for a long time he had something that fit perfectly. Sheffield, Rob McCracken, great. So he had it perfectly. He tried the change, didn't quite work out for him.
Robert Garcia was the change in
Garcia,
the rematch
Angel
with
Fernandez.
Usyk.
It was all a little bit, what's sort of going on. He's gone again, but what I've seen this time, Steve, and people might think that I'm bonkers here, but speaking to him, I feel like he's got, same as he had with Rob McCracken, he's got like a father figure, someone he looks up to, someone who he completely respects and listens to.
And you got that from chatting to him because you haven't seen him since he's been back. But that's from talking to him and just getting your gut feeling.
He told his exact words to me, don't ever let no one say that a trainer can't get the best out of you, because I believe different people can get different things out of you. So that just tells me that Derek James is getting something out of him, which he hasn't, that no one's got out of him for the last year or couple of years. And remember this, that might be no one's fault. I'm always dead honest with Joshua. That might be his own fault, because he might have changed.
Sometimes you can stop learning.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. What I would say is when you have change, it means you're not happy. So Fraser's spoken to him since, obviously, the last change, and he seems more settled in his mind, which is a good thing. But yeah, I think the last couple of trainers, he's obviously hasn't been happy, and he's not performing the way he wants to perform. So let's hope, Fraser and Steve, that he performs well this time, because he's no spring chicken now, Andy Joshua.
33.
And let's face it, let's get it right here. If he loses this one, that's it. In my opinion, that is it. So he's got to win. It's very, very important. Probably the most important fight of his life.
Yeah, I put that to him, and he said every fight's important, because I managed to speak to him last week. I agree with, if he loses this one, it's not great, but there's always something. It's just what happens is that your value diminishes, and no fighter, especially former heavyweight world champions, want to face the reality when they look in the mirror of realising that their value has diminished. Forget your looks, your value, brother.
Yeah, in some instance, Steve, I say this: as long as there's breath in Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua's body,
We've got something.
We no matter if they both lose the next 10 fights and have not fought each other,
We can get it
as
together.
long as them two are still alive and kicking, we've got to fight. Because you know what? People have wanted to see it since that story of Fury sparring AJ 15 years ago in Finchley. So that's a different case. But we obviously want to see him winning.
You know when he famously sparred AJ, about an hour and a half later, he was on my old BBC London boxing show, and we used to have a recording of that, which we used to play, because obviously it was me talking to Tyson Fury in 2011, but the boxing producer Paddy burnt it because he hated the idea that I'd got a scoop all those years ago. So he's got rid of the tape. So if you're listening and you've got a copy of that, please send it in to the BBC. Kerry Paddy, the boxing producer at the BBC, because I swore I talked to him. It was only an hour after he'd sparred with AJ, and Tyson Fury was infusing. He was, I can't believe how good this kid is. He bashed me up. He pushed me around the ring. He was honest. He was truthful. Anyway, that was then. Let's hope that happens. Getting back to Saturday night. As I say, Eddie Hearn, the promoter, went out to Dallas. We tried to get out to Dallas. It just didn't work. The configuration, the times and dates didn't work. But Eddie did go out there to have a look up close at AJ in his new training environment.
The difference between the training camps in terms of, let's say, EIS or Loughborough, to the humble surroundings of the training camp in Dallas. I'm talking about seriously humble, But I think what he needed, he's in a house around the corner, no massive mansion, no, people picking up his shoes and stuff like that, just grafting.
Wow.
And just a couple of them. I went in the gym. Errol Spence was in the gym doing exactly the same thing. AJ sparred 12 rounds. He was tired. He was flying home that night back to London. He was tired after a very long camp, looked great. Excited. There's definitely some nerves because it's just starting to dawn on everybody how important this fight is. It's very well saying, he should go through Jermaine Franklin. Well, what if he doesn't? What if after 3 or 4 rounds it's not going his way? What if he's got to find something from the tank to save his career, ultimately?
That's what we're talking about.
We are. Because, look, people say, it's a bit harsh saying that, if he loses this fight, his career's over. No, but if he loses this fight, his world title ambitions are over.
Absolutely.
For now, for sure, for this year.
Yeah.
And there's a long way back of rebuilding. And these fighters get the big opportunity in fights like that. They change their training, they change their desire,
their heads change.
Exactly. And Jermaine Franklin right now, look at him on social media, he's chomping at the bit to
like
get his hands on Anthony Joshua. He looks like he's done about 20 pounds.
I agree.
Hopefully that won't help him, but he's going to be faster than ever. He's going to be fitter than ever. He's going to have more desire than ever. This is not an easy fight, and I'm nervous, I'm excited, and I can't wait to see AJ back at the O2.
That's Eddie Hearn. It struck me that he was a little bit sort of surprised at just how basic and simple AJ's life is. But there again, Fraser, all the years he was in with you in Sheffield, both as an amateur and as a pro, and obviously you were around, Rich, he lived a normal life there, didn't he? It wasn't like he stayed in a luxury apartment out somewhere, in the suburbs of Sheffield. He lived with you guys in the same accommodation, didn't he?
He did, Steve, for a long time. And things did change eventually, let's be honest. And I can understand it as well. The man's a lot, he had a lot more wealth and a little bit more knowledge. Maybe was that the downfall, going from a single bed to a king size with silk sheets? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
He didn't have silk sheets. You're ripping the proverbial out of it there,
you know what I mean. But maybe Richie will tell you, I think in boxing, a basic life is definitely the best one to live. But I understand Joshua's moves, and he had his own chef, and then he had his own house, and he had a couple of people around him that someone could drive for him, someone to massage him and stuff. And looking down the history books, a lot of champions have done the same thing. Do you know what I mean? So
just pick up something each fight has the wealth of crews.
Can't all
be like Marvin Hagler. Can't all be Marvin Hagler.
But your knowledge gets more, and you want to learn more, you want to bring more people in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose Sugar Ray Robinson all those years ago in the 50s when he had a tap master, when he had a dance master with him, he had someone to cut his hair, and he had a French guy who was a famous clown dwarf in the circus. So he travelled with that guy. He had a dwarf on his entourage, and he shipped his massive pink car all around Europe. So everywhere he was in Europe, the pink car would be offloaded from a train or offloaded from his ship for him to drive this massive pink fancy car from the 50s through the streets of wherever, Brussels or Seville. He had an entourage of anything, and of course he finished his tour by losing his world title to Randolph Turpin all those years ago. Anyway, I went off on a little bit of a route there. One thing that AJ did say to me, which I'm not going to disagree with him, because his opinion is his opinion, so I can't have his opinions for him. But I talked to him about pressure on this fight. And like you're saying, Rich, you think this is the most important fight of his life, and I couldn't disagree with that. He does. He insists that there's no pressure, or he feels no pressure. That's going some, to feel no pressure on a night like this.
It is, and I think deep down, I think he's under a bit of pressure myself. I think he's hiding it very well, and probably that's his way of dealing with it. But I think deep down he'll know that he can't afford another loss, to be quite honest. I think if he's going to be considered as one of the world's best, I think he needs to win.
Especially against Jermaine Franklin.
Yes, against Jermaine Franklin, who, let's face it, like I said, he's behind your Ruiz and your Wilders of this world. So he is a good American fighter. He's only lost one fight to Dillian White. So he's a well-respected fighter. And I think AJ's got to win. So I do think, Steve, deep down, there is pressure on him. I think he's dealing very well. But going back to the training side of things, one thing you have to retain as a fighter, no matter what the success is that you experience, you have to retain that passion and hunger to succeed and be successful. And that means that you're not the boss in the gym. When you go into the gym, you say to the coach, "What am I doing today, coach?" And he says, "You're doing this." And if it means you've got to jump through that and that's what you have to do.
You say how high.
Exactly. You have to retain that hunger. Listen to your coach and get the work done. And the harder you work, the luckier you get. I've always said it. You've got to retain that hunger and that desire to win and succeed.
Which I love that. But in modern terms, most coaches, especially mercenary American coaches, mercenary British coaches, that's not an assault on them, calling them mercenary, because that's what they are. They're for hire, just like a mercenary is. Those guys, they don't necessarily they don't really tell that many fighters what to do. It's a lovely idea what you're saying. Yeah. And if people were wondering about the reference to Marvin Hagler went through his career with a corner man, a cuts man, and a trainer. He started his career with the three of them or the two of them, and he ended his career with the two of them, and that was it. When Hagler travelled for a fight, that was it. That was the party. That was the travelling party. No security, no hangers-on, 3 or 4 of them. That was absolutely
But at the same time, Steve, the point I'm trying to make is what you can't have is, because of the success that you've had as a fighter, you can't be then going to a gym and saying, "I want to spar today, coach," or "I want to do bags today." Or this. And they say, "No, you're not. You're doing this, and you're doing this circuit, and you're doing that." You've got to be told. You can't be the boss in the gym no matter what the success is.
And I think that Derek James is the kind of man that will say straight away, whoa, that might have been how you've been doing it. This is how I do it. This is the Derek James way phrase.
And you know what? I think, personally, Anthony recognised that he might have been making that mistake. And I think he's actually gone out there. And remember, I know how he's gone out there. He's not gone out there with 50 people. He's gone out there with him and maybe 1 or 2 others. And he's gone there with a blank canvas. Yeah. Coach, you tell me what to do, and I'll do it. He's gone with the correct attitude and mindset, and I think we will see not the old Anthony Joshua. I'm hoping we see a better Anthony Joshua. I really do think we'll see it.
Well, you know what, Fraser? That would be fantastic, because it would be really great to get part of that old Joshua back, part of that arrogance, part of that letting his hands go. In fact, it's interesting you should say that, because Richie and I have sat down and watched back the Usyk fight. We've gone through the rematch of Usyk, and we've gone through the things that AJ did right or did better than he did in the original fight. We've looked at it, we've analysed it, and looking back on the recording Richie and I done, which will be available this week as one of our 5 live pods as part of our build-up to Anthony Joshua at the weekend, which is going to be live on 5 Live from 10 p.m. at the O2. What Richie and I was doing as we were sitting there is I think we were reminiscing about that other AJ, that older AJ, that more clinical, nasty AJ. It'd be nice to see a bit more of that against Jermaine Franklin. So keep your ears open for that pod. That'll be out later this week. Okay, so just as we move towards the end of it, we've got Jermaine Franklin in the opposite corner. We've got Anthony Joshua there, and we've got hopefully 19,500 fans plugging in to that old Anthony Joshua vibe. How do you see it going? I'll ask you first, Rich, then I'll come to you, Fraser.
I think he's the perfect opponent, Franklin, for Joshua to look good. And I think Anthony Joshua will get his name back up in lights in everyone's mind. I think he's going to win by a spectacular knockout.
That's lovely. That's what I like to hear from you, Richie boy. Fantastic, son. Fraser, how you see it going?
Yeah, I've got to say the same. And to be fair, you know, that no pressure that he feels, we'll see. When he starts letting his hands go in round 1 and 2, that's not pressure, but that is, I'm back and you better know I am. I think AJ does it, and I think he does it spectacularly and early on as well.
Yeah, he was talking to me when he was sort of talking, sort of not on the record, but not off the record, and you could just tell there was this little bit of desire in him to just get something done and just leave a statement. You know, I mean, I understand fully when he says, look, it's just about winning. I understand that. And when he says there's no pressure, but there'll be something burning inside AJ, because even though he's been around the British public an awful lot and a lot of the British public really love him, there is a nasty side of AJ. As you know, Fraser, you fought him famously in the town hall in Burton all those years ago.
There is Steve, and I've done many rounds with him. I've had spars that have gone nice, and I've had spars. I've seen the vicious side of him. And let me tell people this. Anthony Joshua unloads on you with combinations in them 10-ounce gloves. I don't care who you are. You're gone. I don't care who it is. Obviously, Usyk never given him the chance to do it, but I think Jermaine Franklin will give him plenty of opportunities. Therefore, that's why I can't see it going, nowhere near the distance personally.
And I think that's just how we all feel. Richie, it's always a pleasure and a delight to sit with you and go over fights and look forward to fights and look back on fights. And Big Fraser, it's a delight to have you, to talk to you and have you on the show. Your eye is healing as we've sat here for the last hour. It's now better than it was when you sat down. Fraser Clark, unbeaten now. Is it 6 as a pro?
6-0, mate, yes.
6-0. Olympic medalist, Mr. GB Boxing. Well, if Natasha Jonas is Miss GB Boxing, then you're Mr. GB Boxing. Thanks very much, fellas. We're going to have daily pods this week. It's an anti-Joshua week. What do you expect? You can go to BBC Sounds for those. Just keep across social media and you will be able to follow them, track them, and listen to them. It's always a pleasure talking to you, especially when it's a heavyweight week.
Let's get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.